What's up? Okay, so today we're going to be breaking down my remix of Into You, Ariana Grande. I really, really like the song. I made it a long time ago, and 2017. And when I decided to start putting up music, I'm like, okay, I think this is one of the ones I can resurrect, kind of enhance the production, bring it up to the level that I'm at now, and share it with the world, and hopefully you guys like it. So yeah, I'm really happy that it's out in the world. Oh, I'm getting some echo here. Yeah, thank you for the positive response so far. I'm hoping that the breakdown can kind of give it more context for why I did what I did, and hopefully you can enjoy the song even more. You didn't even tell me you were streaming. I mean, that was from Franco. Yeah, I mean, if you're a super fan, you would follow on my stories on Instagram, and you would know this, but it's not a big deal. I just know who my true fans are now. Thank you for the ones that did show up without needing to be told by anyone else. Just kidding. Yeah, I'm excited to show what I've been, like my process for how I've been working on music. This is probably going to be the most in-depth kind of run through everything. I'm going to show the way I work with like bus systems. I'll even show the mastering file since I mix and master my stuff as well. And then kind of just talk about process and show you all the sounds and stuff like that. So hopefully that is somewhat interesting. So yes. So let's just dive into it because I don't have much else to say other than thanks for tuning in. It means a lot. And I hope that you guys get something out of this. Let's go. This took about 3 days to make. The first thing I did was kind of go in and do the reharm stuff, and make it saucy on like a remix level. Thank you guys. You're my true fans, with me no matter what. Okay, here we go. So yeah, let me talk through the original synth idea that I came up with first, which is just this really simple, sounds kind of like the Nord classic patch that you start with. The actual synth sound, if you want the download of that, is it's called Lyrical Synth inside of Logic. This is back when I was using a lot of just Logic stuff, which still happens to this day, but happened more back then. I still like the sound. It's one of the ones that's kind of stuck around. Let me just play a bit of that so you guys can hear it. So that was just done through MIDI. I was trying to figure out something that would make the tone a little more, how would you say this? Ominous sexy, because of the somewhat ominous sexy vocal that Ari's doing. A little less pop, a little more dark, but still trying to get like that urgency across. Yeah, so that was the first sound. I did a few things to it. You can hear that there's some modulation going on just with the chorus and stuff like that. And then eventually went in, did a simple EQ, getting rid of a bunch of mud, and then sidechaining it. Yeah, that's how it started. So I can just play the lead. Well, here's the thing. I'm gonna have to we'll find out if the Twitch gods are gonna look good on me or not, because we may get a takedown because I'm using an acapella here. We'll find out. But this is how the sound is with the lead and the synth together. This is just the very first thing I started with the song.
I'm so into you, I can barely breathe. And all I wanna do is to fall in deep.
So you can see it kind of changes the mood a bit. It's not upbeat yet. It's just kind of like setting a mood. I wanted to treat this song, like when I was making it, like I was making a pop song. Just kind of a bit left of center pop song. And then, once it gets to the hook, like the drop, then, okay, we're in remix land. But I wanted to think like, okay, like let's still make this accessible and pop and interesting. So that was the first sound that came along. There's a simple little thing that goes along with it, which is this reverse that comes in to kind of push it a bit. Which is nice. Just kind of pushes the momentum a bit. And then we step into the next part of the song, which is these plucks and things like that. So let me just play these by themselves. So again, quite ominous. It's got that bounce to it because of the side chain. Let me just do the classic before and after so you can hear what the sound was before. And then I added a whole bunch of effects just to get it moving and stuff. But the original sound was this. Different. So you can see I'm like using a pitch wheel on the keyboard to give it that kind of feeling. And then all of the moodiness of it, the dreaminess of it, as you would say, comes from the effects. So throwing the Logic flanger on it, just kind of making it, giving it some extra little dance. And then this thing's doing some distortion. A hint of too much. That's about right. It's on, but I'm pretty much just driving it. So it's getting some distortion. And then we're using this guy to get some around the head feel. And then the verb, which is doing a big part of the dreaminess. I like to do the panning into the reverb so that it's kind of panning into a space, not after the space, so that it's not as an extreme of a pan. It's a little more diffused because of the reverb being after it. It kind of grabs it and holds onto it, so it's not as kind of shifty. Then just taking out a bunch of the highs with an EQ. Just getting rid of some of that pluck on top. And then sidechain, as per usual. And that's how you get that kind of sound. Ominous, interesting, dreamy. And then I tried to, what I was trying to do is just start to incorporate some remixy type sounds, more of the EDM kind of classics, so that the expectation is slowly getting set for that kind of feel. So this is one of those sounds that kind of just has that feel. So it's pretty MIDI sounding, kind of a little more electronic, less analog-y, but that stuff is sometimes welcome in these contexts. There's some, tremolo going on and groove stuff, but that's all been printed at this point, so you can't see it. Sorry. And then we go into these to add even more kind of like mystery. More kind of classic sounds. And then this one is kind of like a big wide pad. So that kind of sets you up. So for context, this is this part of the song. It's the build. And then we're into the actual groove part there. So yeah, and then the sounds kind of continue. Some amp up a bit. You can see this saw kind of takes over a bit. You can hear it in the mix. So that's kind of the one that's driving things along with the bass, which we'll get to. And then we'll go through the rest of the sounds in the first part of the song before we go into the drop, because the drop is its own animal within itself. So let's go through the drums, because drums are always fun to go through. So right off top, we have a classic, just big boom sound to, get the song kind of keyed in. So it sounds like boom. It's just a kick with a ton of reverb on it. was using the Valhalla shimmer at this time a lot, so you can hear it in context.
I'm so into you.
Just right off top, boom, okay, we're into something interesting, and then it hits later on in here.
But close ain't close enough till we
It's kind of another feeler there, and then some shaker just barely doing some rhythm, but just enough. It felt like it needed something to push it a tiny bit, so it's just doing this. Some nice reverb. Beautiful. And then, yeah, the actual groove kicks off on the "Tell me what you gave me it for." I don't know why I used Ari's vocal for it. I probably should have just sung it myself to do a real cover, but next time. Stupid. So the whole groove sounds like this, just so you guys can hear that. So a few elements going on. This is a classic pop trick to kind of just have small grooves that are super high pass and low pass in the middle, just kind of push things forward, and then you have your main groove as the focal point, which is the kick, snare, and clap kind of sound. So I'll split them out one at a time. Some of these are just kind of loops that I've messed with, and some of these are made for the song in particular. So here's one. So you can hear there's a whole groove in there. If you listen to, you know, like most pop songs, if you're able to get a hold of the actual stems of them, because people leak them sometimes, you can hear that in most. I was literally just listening to some Ari stems today, and you can hear in most of these there's analog drum sounding stuff playing pretty quiet in the back, but again the highs and lows are taken out, so it's kind of just adding a bit of push and drive. This stuff is super useful to kind of add dimension to a song. So that's one element, and then the other guy here, let's find out what this is. Yeah, so just kind of like a snare topper, just to add some presence to it. Then we have this perk, another groove, and you can see that this one actually, over time, I had the, you know, it would be this kind of thing. Take out the lows, and as it comes up, we'd sweep up, so that we're really ready for the next section. And then we have the hats just grooving along. Just a great little low pass hat. And then we have the kick sound. Punchy and thumpy. All you can ever ask for from a kick. Okay, so then the drums get more exciting in the next half. So let me just play going out of here into the next part. So a few new elements are added here. There's a snap. I mean, honestly, it's a clap, but I thought it was a snap at the time. Let's change that. Clap. And then there's a one underneath it. Which that one survived on MIDI. Didn't bounce that one out. And those together just kind of make it a little more beefy. Then we still have the percussion kind of elements on top. And then the other main element that comes in is this groove. Again, not super, super noticeable in the mix, but that's the stuff that is underlying, kind of making things push a bit. There's not much else that gets added there other than some automation and a classic riser. If you pay attention to my streams, as I show more songs, this riser will show up in pretty much any song that needs a riser in it. I'll change the tone of it and, you know, add different effects and stuff like this, but it's just, I don't know, it's just a riser I like that has become part of the, I guess, the Xander Miller sound. It's just a classic Omnisphere riser. just setting up the drop there. And that is it for the drums there. So let's throw the drums in with the bass, because that's a nice little fancy groove we got going. So off top, the bass is kind of just chilling. It's just a really kind of, it's not getting in the way at all. It's just kind of adding some weight off top, so that the intro and the first verse kind of has some support. And then you can see when the bass comes in, the next part, that's when it kind of picks up a bit with the drums. All right, no spoilers. Okay, so that part, yeah, so that is me just trying to add a bit of a counter melody to the actual melody, because nothing else in the song has added any counter melody yet. It's mostly just kind of chord supporting everything. So I felt like the bass might be a cool way to kind of get some interesting melodic ideas in. Another thing that I think about when I'm doing remixes is people know the song because it's a massive pop song. So you have a bit more room to kind of add in a bit more of interest, like some more interesting ideas than you would in a normal pop production context, because you don't have to introduce the audience to the song for the first time because they already know the top line. So, to an extent, I feel like there's a bit more room to fill it with interesting ideas to make it interesting to a new listener. So this is one of those contexts where I felt like an interesting, saw deep kind of driving bass. It's not even a saw. I'll show you what it is. It's a sine wave with a whole bunch of distortion on it. And it felt like the right thing to kind of help push with this part of the song. So this is, again, when I was using Logic stuff. So this is a preset called Basement Bass inside of Logic. It's literally just a sine wave. I think they have like a little clip distortion plugin on it, which I probably kept. But then I've gone in. I'll solo it so you can hear. So I've added a bunch more lows to it, subs and stuff like that, and then I've just distorted it pretty hard, just to give it that energy. And then we step into the next part, which is where the basses kind of get a little wild. This is the chorus of the original song, the pre-drop in this context. Yeah, Franco just said "wah." Yeah, or "wow, wow." Wow. Yes. Oh, this is probably wow, as oh man, what's it? Owen Wilson would say. Yeah, that's a great feeling part. That's actually the reason that is so loud in the mix at this point, is because of Franco. When I showed him this version, he said, "Please turn up that." So I said, "Yep, you got it." So that ended up being pretty high in the mix, a feature kind of sound. So that whole groove together feels really nice, and helps push the song into the drop. Sets expectations that, okay, we're not just doing a kind of chill pop like remix. Like maybe we're going into some new territory here. I like trying to set expectations, to an extent, but also in this context, I wanted the real drop to feel like, whoa, didn't see that coming. So setting expectations, driving up to that point, but you don't know still what's going to hit. So when it does hit, it's like, okay, this is a fresh experience. So yeah, that's it for the bass and okay, sure. I'll show you the individual basses here just so you can see why I did 3 different basses at once. So here's one. So these are all basement bass. the preset in Logic, and I've just kind of done all sorts of stuff to them. So this is a plugin that I really like. Gain Station, it's Mike Dean's distortion thing. If you want that Mike Dean distortion thing, this thing does an excellent job at it because he helped design it. And then I've just made it super wide, somewhat wide, with the chorus kind of plugin of Microshift from Sound Toys. And then we got some other basses going on. So here's the second one. So that one is up the octave from the original. It's just kind of adding some meat in the middle. I can show you what it sounds like before. It's kind of honky. Not a huge fan of it, so I had to do a whole bunch of stuff. So I threw on a little pull tech, adding some lows in around 100, adding some around 200, getting rid of some around 200, and then adding a whole bunch of presence at 5K, boosting the highs like crazy, and then that helped it. So without it, you can see how it brings out that kind of like saw quality to it, some drive, and then doing some little EQ, adding even more presence in it. This kind of stuff. And then distorting this guy again, even though it's already distorted. Just kind of making it feel fatter and bigger. And then I sidechained it twice just because I felt I kind of switched up the groove a bit, the sidechain groove, so I had to kind of add another one on. A little harder now. And then adding that Microshift again, make it a little wider. And then one last little EQ. Just getting rid of the low lows because this guy takes care of that low low. That's the sound by itself. And before. Just bigger, wider, more interesting. And then this is the sub that kind of drives the whole thing underneath. Beefy. And we'll do the before and after so you guys can hear what I was doing. This one's a little closer to the same. But, just grabbing some, actually these are quite similar. I would probably just copy and pasting that setting just so that it had some, adding some more of that same color, some brightness and a little bit more subbiness. Doing some EQ, same thing, adding that brightness, distorting it the same way. And that was it. And these are the same sound, just I've gone in with Logic, gone to the transpose function, brought it up 12, and with the bass, the main bass, it sounds like this. And then you add the octave above. And the way that I try to do this is I will add a Microshift or some sort of chorus plugin to make the octave up one wide and not in the way of the mono signal. That's the kind of driving bass underneath. And then with this guy, which is more melodic, goes like this. And that's how you get that part. Cool. So the other part in here is this guitar. Well, I'll show the guitars here. So there's a little part in the verse that sounds like this. For context, we're in here on the song. Just a nice guitar. It's a dreamy guitar with a nice little counter melody. Trying not to get in the way too much of the more melodic bass underneath it, or the actual chord or the actual vocal from Ari. And then the before and after. This was made in guitar rig with my guitar, nothing crazy going on. I can't remember what preset I was using on there, but this is the original sound, which is nice. Just doesn't have that presence to it, so then I went in and added some EQ, just cranked the highs on it, cranked some of the 5K on it. 5K is usually one of those places that you can add presence to a sound if it feels a little lacking. I learned that from Greg Wells. Shout out Greg Wells. And then I was taking out some mud around 200 because that was unnecessary. And then going in with an EQ and doing a whole much more of this bright stuff on top and getting rid more of that kind of mud, because the synths are taking up that mid-range area, so the guitar didn't need to fill that in. And then you guessed it, micro shift to make it wider. So that one in context is going to make it shift over to the right because of the way I have Logic set up. And then just compressing it pretty gnarly, just so that everything kind of has its moment and no notes are quieter or louder than each other. Just doing some hardcore compression. And then that's this part. I'll just mute the vocals so you guys can hear the instrumental there. Yes, and then we bring in a new guitar groove, which sounds like this. It's sort of James Bondy. I don't know how to describe that. Kind of got that. What's that song? Black Eyed Peas kind of thing going on. It's like that surfer rock guitar, but with a whole bunch of delay and reverb and stuff like that. Just kind of trying to build anticipation, adding a new counter melody type thing in. Again, probably the same tone as this guy. We just played with more echo and delay on it and stuff. And before and after, it looks like I did exactly the same copy and paste on the EQ and all that, but you can just hear them all grouped. So you can see it's adding more bite, more presence to it. Sidechain is nice on this, bro. Thank you. Finding the right pocket for the sidechain is always a tough thing. But thanks to Kickstart from Nicky Romero, it wasn't that difficult. After I found the right kind of pocket for it, grooves nicely. Yeah, so that's that part. Those are all the sounds, other than this little sneaky folder down here that I can talk about later, that isn't on the instrumental. So let me just play the instrumental from where it's sort of interesting through to where the drop hits. That feels pretty good to me. Okay, cool. So let me show you the background elements. So what I actually was able to get was all of the stems for Into You, the original. I found them, someone leaked them online. Shout out that person. I hope it doesn't happen to my songs, but it was a blessing to go through this and kind of find stuff that I liked. So I grabbed a bunch of the backgrounds and chopped them up and did some interesting things with them. So Ari is one of the best singers I can ever, think about in this era with background interesting ideas. She's just crazy with it. It's one of her specialties, anything with the voice, she's just crazy. So I wanted to use some of her sounds as kind of more like sound design type elements instead of just being like your classic background. So one of them is this sound. So I've octaved that, so it's got the actual one, and then the octave below it playing at the same time, so it adds a bit more presence, and then just reverbing it out and adding a micro shift on that. Again, some of these effects are printed because these files are old, and and then that goes again up here. Is octaved a word? Absolutely it is. Look it up. I'm not a fan of the haters over here trying to question my English skills. Yeah, no worries. I got you. Okay, so that's the original sound for context, you know. This is the buried version of it. So all the highs are taken out of it and reverbed out like crazy. But again, this is the original. I mean, listen to that. That is amazing. Her voice is crazy. So that's obviously they've doubled it and done some interesting things. But I've then gone in and added, sounds like some tremolo to make it a little more dancey, and then whole whack ton of shimmery reverb. Definitely that would have been the Valhalla Shimmer. I love that plugin. And so yeah, and then there's just this main vocal that kind of comes in and supports the lead here. Nice little harmony. I'm going to try not to play too much of it in case they are really stringent on the takedowns. We'll see. Tea. A little fluff in it. Stay hydrated, as they say. Also, I just used a Keurig thing, and I made a coffee earlier today. And then I put some hot water through it to make some tea, and I forgot that I had the Keurig, the coffee thing still in there. So I'm getting some coffee tea mix, and boy, do I feel great. Rejuvenated really. So there's some harmonies, and then there's this kind of moment happening here that sets up the chorus. You can hear it with the production. So that's an Ari vocal that's part of the actual lead that I've taken out, octaved down. I turned it down one octave. Gives it that kind of more remixy feel, I guess. And then added some reverb and stuff like that. This is a very reverby song. So again. So you can hear the tail on that just goes and goes and goes and goes. I like sounds that can kind of wash over to use as transitions. If it was just a short reverb, it doesn't have the same transitional effect because otherwise, you know, these parts are a little bit different. And if you can have elements that tie the two together and the kind of tail washes over it, it's more, okay, we're into a new part that's different, but also it feels cohesive. That's like a little trick I use all the time, is just one or two elements that are helping transition can kind of wash out through that part to kind of make it of a more smooth transition. And that's about it for that section, other than, you know, just the lead, and that's just the lead. I'll put a few effects on them, but when you get it mixed by the greats, why do you need to do much to it? So, okay, now we are going into the drop, the first drop. So let me just play it instrumental wise so you can hear what's going on there. Play it halfway through the chorus. There it is, instrumental. I really like this feel. Yeah, took some chances with trying some weird things there, but the most interesting part of this is probably, well, to me at least, is the vocal chop that I'm pretty sure Max was the one that mainly produced this one, Max Martin. This thing sounds like this. So in the original, that thing is riding through most of the song. That's the ooh, 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 you know, that kind of goes throughout most of it. It gives it that bounce. So I love that sound. And I thought, okay, how can I incorporate that into the final version? So what I ended up doing was putting it into melodyne, because it's actually a chord that stays on the one pretty much the whole time. But I'm like, well, I've reharmed this and added my own progression to it, and I want it to kind of follow that progression. So I went into melodyne, opened that up, and then took the notes and moved them, each degree of the ha, and made it into new chords and reharmonized it. If you listen to the original, you can hear that it's kind of whereas this has more of a progression to it. So you can hear that with the bass. It feels nice. There you go. When I'm doing remixes, I usually don't grab a lot from the original production, because I like just kind of starting fresh with my process. But vocal stuff, I usually try to find as much good stuff in there as I can and kind of reimagine it in a remix. So that's one of the elements that I'm like, oh, I just love that sound. How do I make it work in this? The bounce in it is really cool. And you can hear it's a bit degraded and a little bit distorted in not the best way possible. But in the context of the mix, that stuff never really matters, as long as you got it bright and shiny and sounding good. So the original sound was this. So then just adding a bit more presence to it. Again, 4 or 5K usually in there, and a Pultec is going to be great for adding that. Adding some air on top, and that's about it on the Pultec EQ. And then using Soothe, because sometimes you need Soothe. So this is a plugin that will go in and you can find harsh frequencies, and it's going to try to duck them in a very, very healthy way. Bit different than an EQ if you want to know how this plugin works. There are many, many great examples of it being used on YouTube, and we'll do a better job explaining it than I do, but very handy plugin. Yeah, okay, so then after that we have the sidechain. This thing just on the basic setting, on mostly a full mix, grooves like this. Just ducks a bit more, so it's got more of that groove. And then EQ, just adding a bit of highs on just the sides, because I want it to kind of shimmer a bit more. So you can see it's just dynamically pushing that up. And then some washy reverb. So the way I usually use this thing, just as an aside, is I really like using just this. I don't really change it much beyond the 70s filter. It usually sounds good to me. The ones I usually use are Bright Hall, Room, and then the classic that it opens with, which I think is, Concert Hall. Those are usually go-to ones for me with this thing. I always just play with the mix. Usually keep the pre-delay around here. Sometimes you need it right away, but other than that, 20 milliseconds is usually fine. And then mostly playing with the EQ cutoff. So on this context, I want to get really bright and shiny. So I brought it almost, as high as you can kind of perceive. And then getting out all that mud in the lows, because I didn't want that reverb to kind of get in the way of all the interesting synths going on. And then decay, just move that to a point where it's shimmery, but not, again, getting too much in the way of everything. So again, by itself. That with the drum so you can hear the groove. Feels good. And then let me just show you while we're on the synth folder here, let's just go through the synths. So again, I was trying to borrow from the more classic remix EDM type sounds on this, so that it has I don't love going in one genre exclusively for anything that I make. I always try to borrow from a few different places, but I did want to kind of pay homage to the remix sound in general of EDM music. So some of these synths will kind of be more in that space, and then there's other ones that are far from it. But let's just go through these so you can hear them. Classic big hall reverb kind of dancing along. And then just the saw. Again, this thing. Shout out all the EDM lords out there. Together. The hall reverb with EDM and drops is just a classic, so I thought, hey, I can do it. Let's do it. And then there's this thing that comes in halfway through. Just adding some ear candy halfway through the chorus. So that with the drums sounds like this. Sounds like this. Cool. And then I can show you the basses. The bass sound stays pretty much the same as the pre-drop, but you can hear these separated out. The mono sound. And then this is the, again, same trick, octave up, adding some drive. I really like that sound in general. Logic's transpose function is not perfect, but for this context with dirty stuff in general, which is usually the sound I go for with big sounds, I like that it's not a perfect octave replication. Like the same thing as going in with MIDI and bringing the sound up an octave. I like the artifacts that it leaves in there. It just kind of makes it a little more dirty and whatever, you know, gritty. So together, the basses are like this. And again, I will say this all the time, but if you guys have any questions at any time about anything that I'm doing, shout it out, and I would love to answer anything that's going on. Yeah, so that's it for the basses and the synths. And then let me just show you all these drums. There's a lot of drums going on here. So as a drum bus, this is what they sound like. And I should show the little pre-roll on it. For context. Cool. So a lot of the drum sounds continue on. The groove changes up a bit. And there's a few things that get added. So that kick still goes through. Just turned it up a bit. Oh, let me show you it by itself. Thumpy. Thump, thump, thump. And then this is an 909 kick. Kind of adding some round impact, and then the snare. Kind of like a gated, sort of gated sound there. And then we have this little snare clap thing that continues together. And then going into a hi-hat line, the straight one. Just kind of keeping rhythm. And then we have these rolling hats. This is the main thing that's adding that groove. So this is something I would have just played on MIDI, played with the velocity, kind of moved it up and down, made it shake a bit. And then the sidechain is what kind of gives it that additional groove on top. So without the sidechain. And then with it. I really like hi-hat patterns that feel human. And so they're not just, you know, they have velocity changes and the classic, you know, how would a human play it, you know, as the main featured hi-hats. And then there's other parts that are, like I showed before, the background elements that I like having more of that drum machine feel, which is more straight. Speaking of which, I think this is probably that. So this is just adding some ear candy on the sides. You can see it's just a quick little loop. And there's a little trap hats and some crazy phase going on with them just to add some interest. Just little things like that. And then I'll show you the little sweep in that helps set this part up. So again, for context, drums sound like this. So there's this transition effect. Nice. That would be something in Contact. What's it called? Rise and Hits, I think is what it's called. And then there's this sound. I called it Blue Rise, which is the kind of main focal point in that section, which sounds like this. So that is a snare, which you can hear on the first hit, that I've gone on a keyboard and gone bloop, you know, up the probably 2 or 3 octaves quickly, and it changes pitch as it goes and makes a cool transition sound. I try my best to kind of make transitions sounds that are unique and interesting, and that was the one I came up with that day and it stuck through. And then there's one other element that helps push it through, which is this called phase trap hats transition that I made probably, let's hear it. Yeah, you can hear the phaser going on there, and it's just kind of automating up into that section. So all of it together just kind of sets things up nicely. And then let's see, other than that, there's a 808 hat line, which is probably just, yeah, it's just a drum machine type feel. So you can hear this has no human element to it. It's just drum machine, straight loop, quickly going over and over and over and over and over again. And then all it together. Just kind of about layering things to add some bounce and dance and interesting things going on. So that is it for the drums there. Let me just play the bass and the drums there together, and then I'll add the synths in halfway through so you can hear the context of it all together. Pretty cool. Okay, so then the last cool thing about this drop is the vocal chop. So let me open that up and show you guys what's going on in there. All right, so that would be these guys. You can see all the hidden tracks that didn't make the cut or bounced out. So here's the vocal chop. On this one, I remember making it just actually going in and moving the chorus vocal around and chopping it up within Logic, not using a sampler or anything like that. Came together actually pretty quick on this one. I tried to make it still like pop, and so it's like it's her saying I'm so into you, you know, just octave up, reverbed out, and kind of sounds a little choppy. Back in 2017, this was more in vogue than it is now, but I think it's still pretty fresh to this day. So this is how it goes. Oh, let's play this version because some of these plugins are outdated and they're going to make it crash consistently. So here you go. Yeah, so it's a pretty simple chop. She's going, I'm so into you. I need you to know, you to know. You know, a little back and forth, call and response type feel, and that just goes twice. Again, I would have just gone in, brought up the transposed by 12, and that's how you get that feel. And then it's just kind of washed out with reverbs and interesting effects. So that just with the drums, because these combinations sometimes sound cool. Sounds like this. Yes, and then at the end of that, I brought in her little ad lib. Forget what part of the song She sings this in, but you can hear just adds some finality to the part. Pretty cool. It kind of explodes in the next part, so let me just play it on from that. Boom. Getting some mystery on there. So on most of the lead, I'll talk about this a little bit. It's all got an octave underneath. Sounds like this. Just another classic thing to kind of make it feel a bit more like a remix. It's not super loud in this context, but differentiates it from the original and just adds some beef and meat to it. And that plays even from the top. You can see it's just quiet. It's like Ari having a duet with some very, very manly man. Ooh. And then, yeah, there's a few backgrounds in the chorus that help push things a bit. That again, I've just kind of found nice ones that I like. One of them is this. It's not muted. So you can hear that is what helps set up that hook for context with the instrumental. Again, trying to use the vocal in interesting ways as a utility to get from section to section. I think it works pretty cool there. And then there's one other background in that part that just kind of adds some interest halfway through the drop. Again, that's a background that she tracked, and then I've isolated that and grabbed it. And that is this part. So in the overall mix on the mastered version, that is not the loudest sound ever, but it kind of helps add some interest halfway through the drop. And that's it for the drop. And then we enter verse 2, which is maybe my favorite part of the song. I had a lot of fun making this part. Very groovy. Played with a lot of different sounds and ideas. So let me go with the drums first. So we come out of that drop into verse 2. Switch up. So pulling a lot from the pop kind of techniques for making things interesting. But I wanted to kind of infuse a bit of the just a normal drummer playing for a bit. You know, it's very choppy still and very program sounding, which is the pop way to do things. But I liked having that, you know, it's not the most real sounding snare, but something that sounds a little more human sounding to kind of counterbalance everything. So that groove pared down a bit. It's still got that main beefy kick going. And then there's this ghost kick that comes in that helps push the groove a bit. So I'll just play it from here so you can hear. With the snare for context. That ghost kick is an idea that at the time that I was doing the new version, I was listening to Right Now I'm in a State of Mind. I'm blanking on the name of that. What is it called? No Tears Left to Cry. Yes. And you can hear that ghost kick coming in, but just kind of add some groove. I'm like, hey, that's an Ari song. Let's toss it in the remix. Just a little homage. And then we got the hats grooving along. And then open hats. Very classic, easy groove. And just a little tom coming in. And then there's a bunch of pop sounds on top of that, little percussion things and stuff like that. So you can hear that. And then on top of all of that are the kind of more dancey layers that are borrowing from the first half of the song. So we got this thing coming back. Just making things a little more drivey. I'll play this with that. You can see how much that does for pushing things forward. And then one more groove on top of that. You can hear it by itself. Love this feel. Again, just a classic drum machine sound. This is the stuff, if you go through stems of big pop records, this is the stuff they do on most things. Just to kind of add some additional dimension to everything that they work on. Make it stand out a bit. So by drums all together. Of course, there's a crash on one. Okay, and then with that, I wanted to add a real electric bass because, hey, let's try to bring some human elements into this very electronic song. So that is this guy by itself. You can hear the side chain. This is just played on my Music Man Stingray 5 that I have. That with the drums is a nice little groove. And then with that is this vocal chop that Max gave us, which is this. Which you'll recognize from the original. And again, I've reharmonized it for this part. Save it there for now. Yeah, a bit of a different kind of overall feel, trying to make it a little more human feeling, less digital remixy feel. So then one of the cool parts that lets you know that you're going to a very different section is this. So just using some fancy notes in the scale to transition out, and you'll hear that in this context. And you can hear that Nord is now up the octave, given a bit of a different color, while still being the same sound. New chords. Yeah, really pretty. And then that with the 80s keys. And then this slammed piano comes in. Dance piano. So I like borrowing from different types of dance music or different sounds in general when I'm producing stuff out. For this remix, I'm like, okay, I like these sounds from these types of remixes. I like these sounds from these types of remixes and stuff like that. And so that's a classic, just way, crazy compressed piano. I can solo it by itself so you can hear. And it's just kind of doing the syncopated groove. I'm trying to use, sounds that are familiar and combine them in an interesting and different way. This is one of those sounds that I just love in this type of music. Just building tension, building tension. And then throughout that, you can hear that these guys start sneaking back in. from the first verse and the first pre-chorus. And the Nord comes back. And the piano. And then we're into that next chorus feel there. Yeah, the drums showed you how they build up there. The bass kind of gets ready for it, and then those synth basses join in on that part. And then we have two going at once. There you go. Lots of basses going on at once there. But with a little bit of a dash of mixing here and there, you can get away with it if they're all kind of filling in their own spot. And then, yeah, there's a whole bunch of backgrounds that go on in this part. So let me just play those so you can hear. Some of them are harmonies, some are interesting backgrounds that I've put effects on and stuff. But here you go.
There's gonna happen. Been waiting for you to make a move.
Love that belt. There you go. Her backgrounds are crazy. You can hear some of those harmonies are just, oh, especially this ending part here. Don't take me down, Twitch. Check this out. I mean, come on. That is just rude. Man, I love that. And then we step into the next drop, which is the most exciting part of the song and the thing you wait for in the song, the payoff. So building so much tension through this whole verse, setting it up nicely, and then slowly transitioning back into that more electronic feel. Is not the easiest thing in the world to do, to kind of go from one world to next and fuse them together over time, but that's something that I love doing and kind of feels natural to me, to kind of, again, have expectations played with a bit, which is fun. Yeah, so then we get to this drop and we get these crazy fills going into a big drop. So let me play the instrumental by itself, since you guys know the actual song at this point. You can listen to that for context, but here's the instrumental. There's a lot going on in this section, mainly on the drums, that kind of play with your, again, expectation of what you think is about to happen, making the payoff wait, and then really smashing down on it to make it feel like, oh, wow, okay, this is, and then you're back in the groove and everything feels really nice and heavenly there. So let me just show you the drums by themselves, since that's where the bulk of the transition is made. Cool. So there's a lot going on there. A lot of new sounds come in just for their little moment and they come back out. One of the songs that I think has an incredible transition like this is the Dua Lipa song. What's it called? You guys know the one. It was chart topper, one of her first smashes. Ian Kirkpatrick produced it. Just a great feel and plays it with expectations really, really well. Yeah, so you can just hear these elements kind of split out a bit. I'll keep the kick going just to kind of hear the main pattern, but then I can kind of loop this and show you how the expectations are played with each part after that. So we have the kick going, we'll throw the snare on, so you guys can hear that, and the hats, and then actually let's leave the hats off. And so here. Some Logic being very, very sad and slow right now. So let's turn some things off for now. Go to sleep, Logic. Go to sleep. All right, this should work fine now. Let's make sure the drums are on still. Pull those out. All right. By themselves. So the groove really drops out, and these percussion are the thing that's filling in all that space. So we have a whole bunch of things going on. Throw in the tom fill, which is the first thing you hear. There you go. So that's a classic, just little tom fill going on. Then we have this huge snare that comes in. And then we have this reverse snare that sets up the payoff. And then the snare that is the payoff. And then this riser that comes back, which is that snare sound that I've played up the octave on the keyboard to make this transition sound. And there you go, and then you're in. And the last payoff in that whole section is this rave clap that comes in on the, what is that, the 4. Feels great. And then you're back into the groove. So with everything together drum-wise, you can hear the context of it. Pretty cool. There's a few other elements that didn't get solid, so let me just play that one more time so you can hear it. So some big sounds going on there, really to get it across, like, oh, we're doing something interesting here. So there's some, sweeping sounds, stuff like this. Let's solo that by itself. Just a destructive machine sound. Big smash. There's a crash cymbal. Really distorted out, adding a bunch of reverb and noise to it. And then there's I believe, that is that big smash sound, is this machine thing. You can hear there's a lot of low end in that too. And then you're into the rest of the song there. So that's the huge payoff there. Let me start introducing some other elements so you can hear how those all work with it. So the bass drops out for that section, but you can hear how it plays into it and then comes back in. Nice. And then we have a whole bunch of synths. These all come in with the one hitting with everything else. Nice. And then there is no guitar coming in there. We'll just play this so you guys can hear it quickly. There's just a ripping, 16th note distorted line in the second half of the chorus. Just something to add some angst and, ear candy. You always try to introduce new elements so that you never get anything stale. And that's again in the back, but just kind of helps push things along. Let's see if there's any backgrounds. Yeah, there's a few backgrounds that help this transition pay off. So let me just play this without the synths, without the bass. So you can hear how these vocals set everything up. So I did my best to try to have it pay off at every moment, even after the drop, so that you can catch back into that pocket. Otherwise, it can throw you off quite a bit. So this massive O, kind of solidifies, okay, this was intentional, and then the into you ad lib just smashes down again, catching you back in the groove, so you can listen again with that context in mind. and then you're right back in and you feel the groove hit right. And then there's the actual vocal chop, which you can listen here. It's kind of like the last little bit on top. That sounds like this.
A little more touch my body, 'cause I'm so into you, 'cause I'm so into you.
So that big sweep is what lets the drums have their moment. And then the backgrounds are the payoff. So all of the vocals and drums together.
I'm so into you. Tell me what you came for.
One more time.
Body, 'cause I'm so into you. Tell me what you came for.
Hopefully that makes a bit more sense and gives some color to how this part feels the way it does. Everything kind of plays a small role in getting it across and getting that to have that impact. And to be honest, this was not completely premeditated, like, oh, I'm going to make it feel like this and this beat is going to hit this way. It's more so experimenting. The first thing that I would have done to get this kind of drop feeling interesting was to do the vocal chop with the tape slow down sound and then try to problem solve around that. So this,
I'm so into you, 'cause I'm so.
so I knew I wanted it to kind of slam back in, not on the one, but wait a bit. And then it was all about trying to figure out the right drum sounds and progression of sounds coming in to make that payoff really work. And then adding some, vocal back layers and all that kind of stuff to kind of let the rest of it pay off. So let me play it instrumental wise without the hook melody, and you can hear how this kind of rides out. There you go. So there's a couple interesting things going on there. One of them is I bring back the chorus in the second half of it. It's pretty quiet in the mix, but just, again, trying to add some interest in the second half. So that's these guys here. Just the background elements, no lead. Very choral. Love those. Ari's crazy. So yeah, those are those parts there. And then other than that, yeah, there's the guitar solo that kind of comes in halfway through just to give it some added space and dimension and interestingness. And yeah, that's it for the drop. And let me show you some interesting layers underneath that give the whole song that additional layer of mysteriousness. And I use these sounds to inform the space that the song is in. So all of these are quite low. You'll see the levels are all very low. But together, when combined, you kind of get this floor, this bed of noise. So all together, these run throughout the entire track, most of them. And they just do a good job at taking all of the sounds in this file and make them sound like they are all in one space together. So for context, all of them together, something like this. I'll just turn it up so you guys can hear it. And there's one more sound that comes in later. Some bells. So this is the kind of stuff that just kind of makes the song a tiny bit more interesting because of how simple the song is off top. There's not a lot going on, right? There's just this Nord keyboard with this bass. I felt like it needed something to kind of help add trinkets and interesting ear candy even in the lowest part of the song off top. So you can listen very closely and you'll hear how they kind of combine together. Without. With. So you can see how it's kind of washing back and forth, right to left ear. They're all kind of doing their own thing. It just kind of adds a bit of interest because otherwise these types of sounds, which are MIDI driven, kind of boring things, they don't have a lot of dynamic and interest to them. So if you can add in some real world type sounds to the mix, it just kind of adds an additional character. And I can just play these quickly through so you can hear the different elements that make that full sound. So again, let me crank this up so you guys can actually hear it on less good speakers if you're not in the studio or in good headphones. So there's just a classic vinyl crackle. There you go. There's this kind of bubbly sound. Hear that? And there's some warbles. Just an interesting little, these are mostly tape loop things, samples that I've found and that felt like they matched the groove and the feel. This one's doing quite a bit. And again, you can see I've used the Michael Brauer panning around the head. Kind of keeps motion going. It's a really pretty sound. And then there's this guy. Again, very pretty. Just kind of more distant off in the back. This is a little soundtrack of itself there. And then cycled AP. Let's see what this is. This is kind of more bells, chime type sounds. Kind of glitched and you can't really identify exactly what the sound is, but that's the beauty of it. And then there's tape synth, which is really, really got a lot of tape artifact on it. And then just some nice kind of drone type sounds on it. And then this ringing bells comes in later. As soon as you hear that kind of sound, you have a nostalgic place that it's going to bring you to, which to me, it's, classic sitting on a porch with the chimes going in the wind. Just trying to put you in a space as much as possible with these types of sounds all together. Just a nice little breeze going on while the song is happening. And then in this section, I also just added a one note on the piano, reversed it. It's got, tape on it and stuff like that. And there you go, adding some mystery there. And yeah, that's about it for the song in terms of layers. And let me show you a bit of the more technical side of things, just so you guys can see how that all works. So at this point, I use the same mix bus that I mix into for almost everything that I do. At this point, there's a few tweaks that have been made, but this is kind of how it always looks. So I'm immediately going into a limiter. This one I'm smashing it pretty hard, just because of the context of the music. You can see, let me just play this quietly and turn this guy down if I haven't yet. Yeah. And you can see I'll probably get like 2 to 4 reduction. We'll see. Let's go to the drop where we really hit. All right, so we didn't hit it that hard at the end of the day. I must have brought things down. Usually I'm getting a little more, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I am happy that there's just a bit of gain reduction going on in this one. Just to kind of catch anything that's clipping right off top, because I do like to drive the mix pretty hard when I'm doing things, just so I can get perceived loudness up a lot more. Classic EQ, just wiping out all the sub 20, and then I was getting a little bit of I wanted a little more separation in the bass, so this is a classic little trick. Go around 150 to 200, somewhere in there, hover around a bit, and then see where you can, duck out a bit of the mud and get more clarity, separation between the bass and the kick. And then this is a Luca Predalozzi trick that I have copied and use on my mix bus at this point. It's a compressor, but I'm only compressing the mid, and I'm compressing it really hard. 6 dB, and then I'm playing with the mix knobs here. You can see I am compressing only this region to get more presence punch right in the middle of the mix. If you want to see how he does it, he has a video. Just type in Pro C2 Luca Predalozzi. He's a mixing engineer and mastering for Diplo and that whole EDM scene. So for this context, it works great. This is the vocal presence area in general. Play with it a bit, but this is going to get things to punch through really well. And then using an imager just to get the low end in case there's any elements that I didn't mono out down there, just monoing out 100 and below, just so we don't have crazy phase stuff going on. Little SSL G compressor, just pretty much doing nothing, a little bit of glue. Took this from Disclosure because, they have great mixes. Mixes only at half, but does a little bit of glue there, and then into a limiter at the end, just in case there's any peaks at the end, but usually I don't have any. We'll see. There you go, just for those tiny little moments, in case they poke through, and that way when I'm mastering, I am happy with not having any distortion or artifacts like that. So that's the song. I'll open up the mastering file so you guys can see how I did that, and then that's it for the song. So let me pull it back to here, so you can see me, and then let me open up the other track, the mastering file. Hopefully this isn't interesting for you guys. Let me know in the chat or in comments when you see this if there's things that you want me to kind of go more in depth on, and show you more of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, explain things. I'm open to kind of show anything at this point, because that's how I learned, is watching other people do it. And if I can pass some of that knowledge on to anyone else that's curious, then that's why I'm doing this. Just loading up. Hope you guys are having a fabulous night or day, wherever you are. Let's see when this will load. Almost there. So when I'm mastering, I usually want to just take what I have and make it a little more punchy and a little bit more in your face. Tighten everything up, and just get that nice limited pop presence. Limiting does quite a bit. You'll hear if I bypass things how much it's actually doing. The mix already feels good, but it's a little bit flaky at times, and so the way that I mix into my mastering chain kind of takes care of that. So let me switch over to the Logic view so you can see that. 1, 2, 3, boom. Hopefully you guys can see. Let me just open OBS real quick so you can see. Yes. Okay, great. So so this is the file. I always just you can see it's not really brick walling at all. There's no big clipping going on. There's transients going out through the whole thing, and then I'm bringing the whole thing down just 3 dB, so that I have some headroom to master and then bring it back up. So this is my chain. This is how it usually looks. There will be a mix of things turned on, turned off, depending on the song. But this is what it looks like. So let me play it. What's the easiest way to do this? I'll just duplicate this down to another track. So you can hear just the raw mix by itself, and then I'll A/B it with the master version. It's going to be louder. That's just the name of mastering. But also you'll hear that this is just a much more what would you say, in your face feel once it's mastered. So this is the mix. Let me bring it up to 0 so at least we're sort of competing. Okay, let me do a little bit more of a smooth A-B. Here we go. So this is the mix. So you can hear there's a lot more oomph and body and low end kind of rumbling through there. So let me show you one more time so you can hear that. That kick is getting a ton of help. The subs are getting a lot of love. And then it's getting wider as a mix so that it's a little more fully engulfing, and then the mids pop through a bit more and the vocal really comes through. So let me play another part of the song so you can hear that context. So this is the mix and the verse 2.
This could take some time. Made too many mistakes.
Let me time this up just so you guys can get the perfect little A-B here. As best as we can do here. So again, here's the mix.
This could take some time. Made too many mistakes.
You can hear how much that's doing. I felt like, when playing against reference tracks, we were lacking on the thump and the low end. So I did a lot to enhance that. And sometimes I'll do it in the mix. I probably partially did it in the mix, but there's things I can do with the mastering chain with my process that just does a lot of the heavy lifting for me. So that's how I do it. So let me go through the mastering chain and you can hear how I do it. Let me just get rid of these so I don't forget which ones I don't have on. Okay, so mix was off. First thing we're doing is just getting rid of some of that harshness, and then a little bit of this mud in here. Who needs that? Just duck that with dynamics. And then just some of this. In this mix in particular, this just has a bunch of wah kind of to it because of the amount of reverb I'm using. So this is just ducking, half a dB. At the mastering context, you don't ever need to do massive moves in general to do a lot. So yeah, just... No one needs to hear that stuff. And then going through the El Rey compressor, Greg Wells, I really like this thing. I think I just generally use his Mix Bus preset, and then just play with the filter and the threshold and makeup, and it just adds a bit of character. I don't really know how to describe it. This stuff is always a little bit voodoo, but I like how it sounds. And when I don't have it on, I don't like how it sounds as much. So this is one of the things that's just kind of always there. And then I go into a Pultec because I love Pultecs. If you don't have a Pultec plugin, highly recommend. So on this, I'm doing just a few little things. Again, mastering, you don't need to do massive moves. So adding a tiny bit of brightness at 10K, adding a little bit of presence at 4K, just to kind of push things through. And then I guess I was hearing a bit of harshness with this song in around 1K. And so I dipped a bit of that out. So I'll just take this off and on so you can hear.
This could take some time. Made too many mistakes. Better get.
So it kind of helps get rid of, just kind of brings it alive a bit more in the 4K range. That's a huge thing that I love doing near the end of the process. It really helps. As long as your mix is good and you don't have a lot of harshness going on, bringing up 4 or 5K is just, with a Pultec in particular, is just money. Okay, then I'm going into Chandler limited curve bender, working with the Tony Maserati preset, just to kind of add that thump in the bass, and a little bit of highs. I love throwing this on pretty much any master. Just add some sheen. Check it out with and without.
This could take some time. Made too many mistakes.
Again, just bringing it alive a bit, getting rid of some of that dust and that muck in the middle. and then going into Shadow Hills mastering compressor. Let's hear this.
This could take some time. But too many.
So adding a bit of loudness, but it's just smashing the track a bit, just a little bit, to add some presence, mainly in the middle, and get the vocal and the tracks down the middle a little more in your face. And then going into an inflator, just doing a little bit.
This could take some time. But too many.
And then into soothe, doing the old just catch anything that's a little harsh. This will be almost impossible to tell the difference if you're not in some crazy nice listening environment.
This could take some time.
Just catching little things. And then this guy is a thing I love to use. It's from Plugin Alliance. So you can look it up and see how it works. I don't know if I'm using exactly how they wanted you to use it, but I use it for on my mix bus or when I'm mastering to borrow an EQ curve from a song that I love that I'm trying to replicate in some way, and then kind of blending that into the mix that I have. So in this context, Say So by Doja Cat, great song, has a pretty bright mix, but it's also got some nice thumpy low end because of the genre. They're kind of blending with pop, and I really like that and wanted to get some of that shine on top while keeping that low end. And I didn't want to lean too much into the EDM aesthetic as I was going along because I didn't want it to sound too whatever digital and kind of more synthetic. So I went for more of a pop direction on grabbing the EQ curve, and I just kind of play with the threshold until it isn't doing too much, but I do like to smash it pretty hard and add some level with this thing. So without it,
This could take some.
let's go to a bigger part of the song so you can see what it's doing. So this thing is usually great for getting your vocals to pop out a bit more if you're using a pop vocal or a pop song that has a nice loud vocal, because the EQ is kind of listening to that. It's 32 bands of dynamic EQ going on in here, and it just does a nice job of bringing out presence. So I'll just do it insane so you can see what it's doing. So you can hear that it's mostly just grabbing the present stuff in the vocal, and controlling that and kind of making a little bump happen there. And then I'm just using the gain here. I like to use this as my first limiter in the chain for getting loudness. So you see I'll be clipping a tiny bit with it. Just here and there, little tiny peaks. I don't mind the sound of this limiter at all. It just kind of grabs things and brings them down and doesn't do anything nasty to it. Yeah, this plugin is epic. You can see how much it does to help get the song to the next level. And then another EQ. Let's see what we did here. Another one, just picking a bit of a different range to duck some of the little harshness of the vocal, just because this hook is like an octave up and going a little crazy. There's some artifacts that happen when you transpose things up that I was trying to duck a bit. And then let's see what this is, the tiniest little, let's go to 6 so we can see what it's doing. Yeah, again, half a dB, around 500. Let's see what this was doing. Just getting rid of some honk. And this is getting rid of that. Nobody needs it. And again, I like using dynamic EQ on the highs because I like having air and I like having shiny stuff. But when when there's a vocal that kind of comes in with that sound, I want it to just duck it quickly and then come back. And so it still has that air in general. And it's just kind of quickly coming in and out. And then I have another instance of Soothe, just de-essing the middle using that preset. And that just helps, again, because this is it can be a bit of a harsh sample on the chorus or on the drop that I have there. And then I love finishing off with the Ozone 9. I use Master Assistant to kind of get an idea of where we're at, and then I'll play with it from there. For this context, you can see this is where some of that low end thumpy rumbliness is happening. There's a bit more presence in the lows here, and then just shelving off a bunch of this shiny, crazy stuff at the top, because by the time everything else is added, it gets a little bit too digitally, and so this thing can take some of that out. And then just, dynamic EQ, wiping out the low rumbly stuff. Helps separate the bass and the kick a bit, as I talked about before with the other EQ I was using, and then getting rid of some of this stuff. Yuck. I like that this uses dynamic EQ. Again, another yucky point, and then again, pretty harsh on the top, so just taking some of that out. All those hi-hats are really poking through. So I don't always do this, but on this one I use the vintage limiter just to get a little bit more loudness. I use the analog preset because I was already pretty sizzly with it, so I didn't want to add any more of that. So the analog model is going to be a little warmer in general. So that's smashing like this. And then the final maximizer is what I have on my chain. Just doing nothing pretty much, just tickling it. So I'll play it with and without the isotope, so you can, or not the isotope, the ozone, so you can hear the difference. There you go. You can see that's adding a bit more of that pillow push to it, and getting a bit of the harshness and stuff like that, and making it a little louder. So that's about it for the song. I'll do a few more ABs on the master, and I can just show different parts of it so you can hear what each section is doing. And hopefully this context gives you a bit of an understanding of my workflow for why I mix the way I do and master the way I do. So without, actually let's do it like this since we have the mixer. Without.
But close ain't close enough till we cross the line. Yeah. So name a game to play and a roll of dice. Hey. Oh baby, look what you started. The temperature's rising and here is this gonna happen. Been waiting and waiting for you to make a move. Before I make a move. So baby, come light me up, and baby I'll let you on it. A little bit dangerous, but baby that's how I want it. A little less conversation and a little more touch my body, 'cause I'm so into you, into you.
you go. You can see it's doing quite a bit, especially on the hooks, on the drops, to push that low end, get that drive going, make some presence on the vocal, get the percussion really alive, adding some width, obviously adding loudness. And I love, I used to not understand mastering at all, but I love having it as part of the process of finishing a song at this point, because it's just the ribbon at the end, the bow on top, just to kind of tie it together and say, hey, yeah, this is a full-on song that ideally can be played next to anything else. And it's going to be competitive with the loudness. It's going to have that roundness, that wideness, that in-your-faceness, and all that. And that's the whole process of starting a remix from scratch, just with an acapella, and going in, reharmonizing some stuff, seeing where the wind takes you, and then getting a mix done, and then mastering it. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed seeing how this all goes. I'll be showing how I've done this with a whole bunch of other songs in the coming weeks and for the next long time, as long as you guys want to see stuff. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I'll be on here in a few days again, doing a breakdown of another song. I can neither confirm or deny, but it may be an Emily Moore song, if you guys want to see that. And then in the next coming weeks, there'll be some new things happening. I'll be having some new guests on. I'll be making songs from scratch. I'll be showing some just more simple, shorter things, some tools and tricks that I do in different parts of the process of making stuff. I hope you guys tune in often and are learning things. And please drop down any thoughts or words of encouragement or questions, concerns, anything that you guys want to see from me. And I'm here to hang out and do this again and again. So thank you, everyone. Until next time, cheers.